Ellen De Generes. Pity play on tour. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained elsewhere that Ellen De Generes is a narcissist, and if you haven't enjoyed my excellent roast of her so far, I'd very much encourage you to do so. You can find it in the HG Roasts playlist, amongst others, such as Gwyneth Paltrow and James Corden, arsehole, who get justified roastings from the Ultra himself. Unaware narcissists can't comprehend why they could ever be disliked. Aware narcissists understand that people will dislike them, but find it entertaining. They recognize why such individuals react that way, and in essence accept it as part of being the brilliant individual that they are. But unaware narcissists have a hard time with it. Upper mid-range narcissists invariably dismiss such dislike as being linked to envy. Well, I am successful, so is it little wonder that they get their panties in a bunch about my success? But that's not my fault. They ought to like me. They ought to admire me. I'm brilliant. I save lives with my surgical skills. I employ thousands of people with the business I've created, etc. They ought to like me, but the reason they don't is their problem because they're envious. Mid-range narcissists are at a complete loss as to why they would be disliked. They believe themselves to be kind people that wouldn't say boo to a goose, that do no harm, in fact do plenty of good. And they invariably complain about their mistreatment, putting it down to racism, misogyny, just inner bigotry of the individuals. Lower mid-range similarly don't get it. They see themselves as a rough diamond, and that they do more good than bad, and that people should take that into account. Even lesser narcissists that don't operate with a facade are perplexed as to why somebody wouldn't like them or want to treat them favourably. They're often particularly deluded as to their abilities, and that's key with lower lesser and middle lesser, that they think, well, what's not to like? I'm great to be around, I'm fun. Sure, you know, here and there I might lose my temper, but it's justifiable. If people would stop winding me up, I wouldn't react like that. Upper lessers are often successful and again see themselves as likeable. The upper lesser A is the affable arsehole. Hey, I'm the life and soul of every party. I'm Captain Entertainment. What's not to like? Look at this face. Fantastic. Upper lesser type B. Why wouldn't you want to be like me? I'm successful, thrusting, dynamic. You should be like me. You ought to want to emulate my success. Thus, whether lesser or mid-range, they are particularly perplexed as to why they might be disliked. And what they will often do is spend time complaining about that, decrying their treatment. In some instances, it might be done in a contemptuous fashion. In others, it's done as part of a pity play. And Ellen De Generes is not exempt from such behaviour as a narcissist. She's made her return to the spotlight 2 years after the cancellation of her talk show. Just recently, she opened the first night of Ellen's Last Stand, Up Tour, her new comedy show. It's also going to be appearing on Netflix as well. She started her Hollywood show by saying, "I didn't care what other people thought of me," which demonstrates the contempt that she had for other people's views. But she subconsciously cared because their response, of course, amounted to fuel and mattered within the context of control. So on a conscious level, she was arrogant and dismissive. We saw that in the way that she would treat people on her talk show. We saw the hypocrisy, of course, as where she built a career upon the concept of being kind, whereas she was anything but. She knew that she wasn't being kind. In actual fact, she was entertained by the instances where she took the piss out of people, not because she had an awareness in the sense of being aware of her narcissism, but rather that she operated with a form of instinctive planning in relation to the way that she treated people. Degeneres, of course, has had problematic few years. This follows after employees on the Ellen De Generes show accused executive producers of toxic workplace issues. 3 producers were fired amid allegations of misconduct and sexual harassment, and Degeneres apologised on air, false contrition, which was designed to manage her facade. But in May 2021, she announced the show would end the following year after 19 seasons. On her show, on the stand-up performance, she told the Los Angeles crowd she had been doing lots of gardening, fascinating, since the show ended, and collecting chickens as pets. Sounds a bit like somebody else we know. Adding that as a former talk show host, she appreciated the pressure of having to lay an egg each day. What else can I tell you, she added. Oh yeah, I got kicked out of show business. Which of course demonstrates that even 2 years after the show ended and 3 years after it was penciled to be ended, it still has the capacity to wound her. That when she thinks about the end of her television show, that invokes a sense of threat to control on a subconscious level, causing her to need to assert control over those that have done her dirty in her mind. Thus, she doles out a pity play. Oh yeah, I got kicked out of show business. And then sarcastically added, there's no mean people in show business. One of the journalists that covered her show, People's Esther Kang, wrote, even though Ellen DeGeneres is looking back at her talk show with a sense of humour, she can't deny that her unceremonious exit left deep wounds. Of course it did. As a narcissist, the fact that her show was cancelled, rather than her making the decision to end it, resulted in her being massively wounded. And each time there is a recollection as to the circumstances of the ending of that show, she's wounded again, and that threatens her need for control. Accordingly, in the now, she must do something to nullify that threat to control, which means she complains about the way that she was treated. There's no expression of regret for what happened to people on the show. There's no contrition exhibited because it's all about her. Yes, she offered an apology on air, but as we know, any apology that comes from a narcissist has no actual substance to it. Now, it isn't the case that Ellen DeGeneres sits there at home mulling over what happened on a daily basis, but each time the instance of the end of her show comes up, it threatens her control, and therefore she must do something to nullify that threat. And here, she's doing it regularly on this new stand-up tour by talking about the fact that she got kicked out of show business, i.e. she's the victim. Kang also mused that after DeGeneres considered how she became the most hated person in America, victimhood, pity play, amid the swirling headlines, DeGeneres said the ordeal reduced her television persona into a shell of its former glory. The hate went on for a long time, and I would try to avoid looking at the news, nullification of threat to control by withdrawal. She added, the be kind girl wasn't kind. That was the headline. Noting how she ended her talk show each day by saying, be kind to one another, DeGeneres joked that it became a problem because people started to think of her as a one-dimensional character who gave stuff away and danced up steps. Again, notice the pity play. Look how people regarded me. And that was wrong. They got me wrong. Do you understand that? I wasn't a one-dimensional character. She also referenced the cancellation of her 1990s sitcom, which occurred after she came out as gay. Talk about bringing up the past. For those of you keeping score, this is the second time I've been kicked out of show business. Eventually, they're going to kick me out for a third time because I'm mean, old, and gay, she said. Victim mentality. She also said that having been in the public for so long, the takedown she experienced has been such a toll on my ego and my self-esteem. Indeed, it does, but what it actually represents is a huge threat to her need for control. She went on to say there are such extremes in this business. People either love you and idolize you, or they hate you. And those people somehow are louder, she added. The stand-up show ended with a question and answer session, with one audience member saying they had been inspired by Degeneres' ability to bounce back after a recent tough period. That would provide her with some positive fuel. Degeneres responded by saying, "It's hard to dance when you're crying, pity play, but I'm dancing now," i.e., she is being defiant. These events took place several years ago, but note how as soon as they're mentioned, it's a necessity for her to nullify the threat to control, rather than say, "That was in the past, let's move on, I'll tell you about other aspects of my career." No, she has to talk about how she's the victim, how she's the one that's been kicked out, how I'll probably be kicked out again. The incessant thread of victimhood that shines through for this particular mid-range narcissist. But she's also contemptuous with it as well. Her subclassification of narcissist is such that pity plays will be used, although they're not extensive. But there's a lot of arrogance and contempt with this individual who, naturally, is particularly successful. But notwithstanding the fame, success, and wealth that she's acquired, the fact that her show was cancelled and references made to it repeatedly threatens that control. So even now, on a stand-up tour, she looks to settle scores and bear out grudges in the sense of talking about how badly she was treated. A narcissist on tour, no doubt. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.